Welcome to the Real Autism Podcast. Real as in relevant, effective, actionable living strategies and solutions for a better quality of life. Join your host, Alicia Gaucher Page, for some real conversations. Sponsored by J. Cole Autism Coaching.
All right, people, welcome to the Real Autism Podcast, where we talk about relevant, effective, actionable living strategies and solutions. And I want to welcome to the stage, well, first, I'm your host, of course, Alicia Gaucher Page, and I want to welcome to the stage Dr. Rebecca Eswine. Welcome to the stage.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Happy to have you on the podcast. For the audience, I always try to leverage my experience of having two kids on the spectrum who I have encountered on my journey as it relates to autism. And Dr. Eswine is one of those people. She was my son's teacher, and my son is on the spectrum. He's nonverbal. He's in the 9th grade now. When did you have him, Dr. Eswine?
3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
3rd, 4th, and 5th. So she knows him pretty well. She still sees him on occasion. She is an awesome educator. So I wanted to bring her to the stage where we're going to focus a lot on the teacher-student relationship, particularly with children that have a developmental delay, particularly with autism. So welcome again to the Real Autism Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you. Like, what should we know about Rebecca?
Well, first off, a little different from when I was Coleman's teacher, but I think first off, I'm a mom. So, and I had a child back in 2021. So right after Coleman graduated from my class and moved on to middle school. So I feel like that has really shaped the way that even as of right now, I think about education and that teacher relationship, and especially that parent-teacher relationship, because now I'm the one as the parent dropping my child off. And kind of in the same way as you were talking about kiddos with developmental disabilities, right? Like when they can't speak, when your kid can't speak and you have to take them somewhere and leave them in somebody else's care, that's terrifying, right? And so just coming at it from that perspective, I feel like has really shaped my identity, especially in the last couple years. But I got my start in special education when I was 15 years old. One of my friends, we were sophomores in high school, and she was like, "Hey, I'm going to join this club where we get to leave the cafeteria at lunch and we get to go into the special ed classes and we get to hang out in there." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'm a selfish 15-year-old kid. So like, A, that sounds like fun because the cafeterias are loud and annoying. And B, that'll look great on my college application." Cool. I walked into that classroom and it was a class for kids with severe and profound intellectual disabilities, and that day changed my life forever. I just felt for one of the first times in my life that like this joy and this passion, and the teachers in that class cared so deeply about those students. They were never not laughing and smiling, even through the poop and the things thrown and the meltdowns and all the things. And they just had this joy that I had never experienced before. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And so over the years since then, obviously I'm not 15 anymore. I filled as much as I could with learning about people with disabilities, and I worked summer camps, and I did respite care, and I coached Special Olympics, and I student taught, and then I taught, and finally I arrived in the classroom. And on that first day, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But what I did have, I feel like, was those relationships with those kids that I had come along the way. I had learned about different kids and different disabilities from the inside and out. And so it really did help me as I was learning the teacher part of being a teacher.
That's awesome. I mean, it's obvious that you have a love for it. It's kind of been embedded with you from that time in the cafeteria when you started it. So when you first started out, just to play off, you said, first day you had no idea like how this is going to work. How did you ground yourself And how did you start like applying practical application, what you learned theoretically when you were in school?
Hmm. I think that like first was just for me as a teacher, like navigating the curriculum, right? Like, what am I supposed to be teaching? What are the standards? What are all of those things that as a teacher I'm responsible for making sure I'm doing day in and day out? What do the kids' IEPs say? What accommodations do they have? What are those scores on the psychological reports? Like what is the knowledge base that I needed to have, and then who's actually in my classroom, right? Like who physically is present in my classroom? What are they interested in? What are they not interested in? And just making sure, teaching is a healthy mix of art and science, right? And so you have the stuff that you learned in school, right? The hierarchy of prompting and like scaffolding and differentiation, and you have all of those things that you learn, but then you also have this art of how do I make all of that engaging and fun and relevant for the kids.
Okay. And can you share a time where, as you were going through this process, you felt either frustrated or some type of challenge as you were
Mhm.
navigating this new career that you had just started? What was a challenge you probably faced?
Think like early on it was just balancing my time and balancing like because as especially as that self-contained special education teacher, when you are, there's different types of special education teaching. So there's the co-teacher who's in a general education class with a general education teacher pretty much all day long. But you're not the homeroom teacher in that sense. So like taking attendance, planning the sub plans, like doing all of those kinds of things. And then there's the self-contained teacher who is that homeroom teacher. And so you're doing all of the things. And I most years didn't have like a planning period. I ate lunch with my kids because, if three kids need to have feeding assistance and there's only one paraprofessional, then I've got to, we're all hands on deck. And so just navigating all of that time. I mean, most of the first initial years on Fridays, I would stay at school until like 6 o'clock at night when the custodian came and like kicked me out of the class because I was like, okay, we're all going home for the weekend. Do you have to go too? And just making sure that I had all of those plans, everything prepped and ready because I didn't necessarily have that time when I was in the classroom, because when I was in that classroom, I had to be on and ready to go for that full, 6.5 hours, 7 hours that the kids were there.
What do you find is the most successful strategies that you use when trying to build a rapport relationship with a student, especially those with special needs?
Yeah, I think like you come into it, you start at the beginning of the year and you get all this paperwork for this kid, right? You get their psychological report, their eligibility report, their IEP, their progress notes, like all of those things. And so you get that time during pre-planning to read about the kid. And then you get this little sneak a peek time where they come in and you meet the parents and you meet the kids and you get this real quick glimpse at who they are. And then that first day, you're up. It's you, right? And so making sure that yes, of course, we've read all those documents, but then you put that to the side and you see who is this kid who's actually showing up into my classroom? What are they interested in? What are they gravitating towards? What is like a hard no? Like, I know I can't have Play-Doh because you won't eat it, right? I can't do this because it's a safety hazard, but I can do this because it gets you excited and really engaged. And so taking that time to just observe the kid, especially those first couple days of school. One of Coleman's other old teachers used to always call the first week of school practice, right? We're coming to school and we're practicing. We're figuring out what we need to do because week 2, we're rolling with it. And so taking that time to really see, who this kid is, what are they capable of, what are they doing, where can I insert myself where they can continue to grow along the way, is really, really important. And just taking that time to observe, right? So like, what are you doing? What are you interested in? And how can I make sure that those things are embedded in some of the plans that I'm doing so that I'll keep you engaged in what we're doing?
You know what I would think is difficult, and I don't know this because I'm not like an educator, but when you have a special education class and it's okay, it's the mod class, moderately intellectually disabled, and you have a variety of kids in there with different disabilities, and just trying to manage that. Each one of them have an IEP, each one of them have their own customized goals, and particularly Coleman, he's on the spectrum. So well, first, how do you manage all of these different IEPs? And then secondly, are the strategies that you're using, like your teaching strategies, what you would use for a child with autism, would that be the same as what you would use for others with other disabilities?
I think it just depends. So I think first of all, step number one is take a deep breath, right? You can do this. But I think too, like looking at, because I did have a mix of kiddos in the classes with Coleman every year, and the numbers were different every year. Sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less. Sometimes the beginning of the year you would start with less, and then 5 kids would move in. And so, the numbers were bigger. And so you do kind of find this groove in this dance. But I think for me, I would plan the lesson, um, but the way that I would engage each student might be a little bit different. And so I know, like Coleman specifically had that AAC device. And so for him, the kinds of prompts that I'm going to give him, the kinds of things that I'm going to do with him is probably more focused on him using that device effectively. Whereas a student who maybe is also non-speaking, who doesn't have an AAC device, that student might just be working more on like pointing to something, matching something. And so
Right.
having like enough visuals to go along with the lessons, having enough opportunities for each kid to respond in the way that they need it was always just really important for me to just kind of bring in that engagement and those opportunities.
And so, can you talk about, have there been any specific strategies that you have used for kiddos that are on the spectrum?
I think one of the things that I use, but I also see it sometimes in some of the different classes I go into, is just the kinds of prompts that you give. And so, if, say, I'm holding up 2 picture cards and it's, you know, a cow and a pig, right? And so I want you to complete the sentence. We just read this story about this pig. Who did we read about? And then they get the question wrong. So they selected the wrong answer. I'm going to give you another prompt, but maybe this is the airless one where I'm specifically holding that picture of that pig closer to you. And so then you select it, but then I re-deliver that opportunity for you again, where it is that field of two where they're even, those picture cards are even. Does that make sense? Right. And so then you have that opportunity to do it again, where you have that field of two choices presented to you again. So you're building up some of that autonomy that you made that selection. You know what the correct answer is. You're showing me that. And being able to apply it. Like that's really one of the things that I feel like helps kids grow, because if I just present the cards to you and you pick the wrong one and I tell you you're wrong and I move on, to that kid, they probably don't understand what that means, right? They really need you to understand that, like, no, I need you to touch this one, this specific thing, this picture means something and it means pig. And then they're going to select that. And I like, really, no, I need you to touch this one. There is something that is correct and there's something that's incorrect. And I don't think our kids necessarily, when they have those intellectual disabilities, just understand making a choice, making a meaningful choice, but then that correlates to like we're going through the lunch line and you have to pick something, right? And so then it becomes kind of that daily living skill too of, well, that broccoli looks yucky. I don't want to eat that, but that corn looks fine. I'll take that instead, right? So even understanding that like I can pick things, I can choose them, it just helps build up not just that academic strength, but also that life skill of just making a selection.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up because as my kids matriculated through school and they got older, I think the focus for me was the academia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Them being to do all those academic things. But as they got older, I was really more focused on the functional skills. What are the things that they can do that will allow them to have a job? Case in point with Coleman. As you know, he really doesn't like handwriting,
Mm-hmm.
but he loves technology. So at some point for me, I was like, it's time to move away from trying to force him to write his, granted, he can write his name, but writing it neatly and writing these full sentences to the goal is for him to communicate, whether that be with handwriting, whether that be with a typewriter, whether that be with the communication device. I want him to prepare for going beyond the school age. Do you have like a perspective of, or what is your thought around moving up and how that changes from academic focus to more of daily living functional focus?
I really feel like for me, like I always had elementary. So I feel like for me, there always was that, like, it needs to be both sides of the coin. And we do need to, like, within the lessons that I'm doing, find that healthy mix of both. Because, yeah, like, great that you can identify numbers 1 to 1,000. But if you can't, like, go to the bathroom independently, then what is you having that number identification do for you, right? There was this one article that I remember reading in my doc program that was like, I can identify Saturn, but I can't tie my shoes. And it kind of was like that back and forth of like, we have shifted over time, when we shifted towards teaching state standards, exposure to grade level standards, all of that, like some of that functional skills can sometimes get lost along the way, but I do feel like there are spaces where we can marry those two together. So like in our class on Fridays, we would have Fun Friday. And a lot of times that Fun Friday was doing our curriculum came with like a science experiment and a craft and a cooking activity. Well, there was a lot of life skill stuff that we could do within that. So like when the recipe was something wild and crazy that like we couldn't do, then we would do popcorn instead. Well, Coleman, you're in charge of making sure you set the popcorn and you got to press the button on the microwave and set it for the correct amount of time. So, yes, we're identifying numbers, which is our academic skill, but we're also doing that life skill of you're not allowed to burn this popcorn because every kid in this class is going to be mad at you if you do that. And they're gonna have some words for you if you don't do it correctly. But then some of those science activities too, things like, or even the crafts, like things that we have to mix and we have to stir, like that's a huge life skill. Do we understand what stirring means and what the importance of mixing things together? Because we can't make the pudding or the jello if we don't mix it correctly. It's going to be gross. So just finding ways to like have those things embedded throughout the day was also really important. I would also do a lot of like workbox tasks as like morning work in the morning instead of like there were no worksheets, like things like that. But things like setting the table or putting things together, taking them apart, sorting things so that they were working on always like something that was also relevant to them when they were outside in the world.
We talked quite a bit about your relationship with the student. Talk to me a little bit about how you establish relationships with the parents. And I know many times when I used to go to IEPs, you guys would tell me, "Oh my God, I wish more parents were like you," or "Hey, do you want to do a training on collaboration?" So talk to me about how you kind of try to establish, I guess, successful related relationships with parents.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing about being a special educator is I picked this, right? Like I picked this career path. I said, this is what I want to do. And I chose it and I put my whole heart into it, right? As a parent, you don't get to pick. You don't get to decide whether your child is born with a disability or not. Like they are born and you're grooving along and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, wait a second. That's not maybe what I expected." Right? And so I think that like coming from that perspective, like that's always been my first, like step number one, right? Like I have to have empathy and understanding for the fact that, like, you as a parent do things that I will never understand. I will never walk in your shoes in the same way when I'm in the classroom doing that. And so I always have to start with that. Parents are doing the absolute best that they possibly can at every single moment. And some, as a parent myself now, like, some moments are really pretty and awesome, and some maybe I could have done better, right? And so I think, like, starting from that perspective is always really important from me. But then step number two is how can we be a team, right? Because the best parent teacher relationships are the ones where we're on the same page, where we're working for the same goals, where the engagement with school might be different for each parent, and that's okay because you're doing everything you need to do to support your kiddo. Um, but having that, where I can call you up and be like, today was hard, we're working on it, and you can trust me that, like, we're going to get through it with whatever we're doing, right? And then you understanding on your side, if I can reinforce anything at home, if I can, reiterate whatever that is, like, having that back and forth communication, I think, is really important, because that's where the trust comes. Like I was saying earlier, like, when I drop my newborn baby off at daycare, I have to trust that they're going to do what they can do to take care of her and do her best, because she can't come home and tell me what happened. She can't come home and say, this person was really loud and frustrating to me and I got upset, right? So it's the same with our students who have those communication barriers in the classroom. You're trusting me with a whole lot, and I have to respect that, and respect that my charge is to continue to do the best I possibly can, right? Like, I'm not gonna send you home questioning whether your bum is gross or not. I'm gonna verify that that bum is clean before I put you on the bus and send you home, because that's your human right, right? And so I think really it comes down to just that back and forth communication, and just being on the same page and being that team player, from both sides. Like, there might be things that you suggest as a parent that I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that, but we'll try it, right? We'll see what happens, and I'll report back and I'll say, we tried it, we did these things, we saw this progress, or we didn't see this progress, and we'll, what's a different solution, or maybe we can come at it from a different angle, right? But if I were ever to just, like, flat out say no to a parent, like, that doesn't land right for me, right? So I just want to make sure that, like, there is that two, we're both on that united front, that same page.
With that being said, in your opinion, where do teachers often face challenges or failed in building strong relationships with parents? Is it mostly centered around communication, or are there other challenges that you've seen teachers fall to?
I think it does really come down to that communication, because if you're not hearing from me, but there's a problem, eventually you're going to hear about it. And do you want to hear about it as a parent? Do I want to be telling you as a teacher when it's a little problem that we can probably fix, or when it's a huge problem where, like, a lot of people had to be involved or the administrator had to be called, like, um, sometimes students, like, they elope, right? They run, like, Coleman loves a good elevator, right? Like, he's going to take off if he thinks that there's an elevator there, right?
Definitely.
And so, like, do we let you know when that one moment happened, or do we let you know when they left the building and we had to call the fire department and all of that? Like, as a parent, when do you want to be involved? And when is it most appropriate for you to be involved? Probably when it's the little thing, right? And so I think that having that communication upfront, daily communication or weekly communication, whatever that looks like, where we all know what's going on, really is the most important part. And I think too, like, sometimes, if a teacher chooses to not send their kid to the school assembly or something like that, like, that's not necessarily something as a parent they want their kids to be excluded from, but their kid also isn't necessarily going to go home and be like, hey, I didn't get to participate in field day today. They're just not gonna know. And so if you as a parent show up to volunteer for field day and you don't see your class out there, there's that mismatch of communication. And so, like, making sure that we are always on that same page really is incredibly important to me.
misconceptions do you think that general educators have about teaching students with special needs, and how can we address them?
Yeah. I think that, like, I even just think back to like when I was in elementary school, middle school, high school, right? Like, inclusion wasn't necessarily as prevalent as it is today, right? Like, you were the special education teacher with your kids over here, and here was Gen Ed doing their own separate thing over on this side. And I think that that's gotten a lot better over the years. I think that especially in like our shared teaching classes where there are students with high incidence disabilities, with autism, ADHD, all of that, like that co-teacher, general education teacher marriage that has to happen, I think has gotten better. But I think sometimes people can, especially if they're new, if they're coming straight out of college, they don't have the training and the background and the experience, then sometimes there can be this like, you're over here doing this and those are your kids and you're responsible for your kids. And I think that that's where that breakdown can sometimes happen because they're all of our kids, right? We're all responsible for all of these students. You know, when my class goes to art, there's still a student in the art class. When they go to any other kind of like music connections, PE, all of those kinds of things, they're still expected to be included. That way that they participate might look different, but they're still a student within the school. And so making sure that, again, it kind of goes back to being a team player and understanding like, I, as a special ed teacher, can support you, but I'm also not an art teacher, so I have to make sure that you're doing the art things, and I maybe can show you some ways to make it more appealing and more relevant for my kids. Um, but that your side, my side thing can sometimes, I think, be a barrier for our kiddos.
Yeah, I mean those are all good points, and I've seen over the years, even working with Jasmine and Coleman, how special education is evolving
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how we how schools are making it more inclusive. Because to be honest, when I first started out, and they tell you to join the PTA, I really didn't feel the need to do so because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't seeing how the programming or the events they were doing really incorporated special education. So I'm like, man, selfish, but just being honest, no need for me to support something that my kids can't benefit from. But over the years, that has evolved, and that's changed. What I guess, what advice would you give to young people, that person similar to you that 15 was like, oh yeah, I like this. I'm gonna make this a career choice, and then they go into college. What advice would you give somebody that's considering going into the field? Like the advice, the stuff that people don't tell them until
Yeah.
they get into the position.
I think that it's always important to know that every single kid is different. So even if you've met a kid with autism, or you've met a kid with Down syndrome, or you've met a kid with cerebral palsy, you've met one kid with one disability. And so every single kid is different. There's no, especially in special ed, there is no one size fits all anything at all. And so I think that having just a wealth of experiences really does help, and working on your own temperament, your own ability to take in stress and stay calm and neutral, because sometimes it gets wild, right? Like, someone's gonna poop right before the fire alarm is gonna go off, and it's gonna be really inconvenient, but like, we're gonna roll with it and we're gonna make it happen, and it's gonna be okay. And so having that, like, making sure you're always keeping yourself in check is also really important, because there are gonna be days that are gonna be really hard. There are gonna be days that are gonna be stressful and strenuous, and you're gonna be like, why did I do this? Why did I sign up for this? We're having a how many hour long IEP meeting, and the parents bringing what lawyer, right? Like, those things happen. Um, but we're at the end of the day, it's about the kids, and it's about, helping them bring joy to their lives and enriching their lives and giving them experiences that they might not have otherwise. And so always have, I know it's corny, but like the what's your why, right? Like the kids should be the why.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know what? It's not corny at all. Knowing your why and really thinking through it, like 7 levels deep. I don't know if you've ever heard of that concept, but asking yourself 7 times, what is your why? It kind of gets to the heart of why you do what you do, because there are tough days, and regardless of what career path you choose, we all have tough days, but being able to reset is going to be critical in you being successful in the role of being a special needs educator. And I'll tell you, I feel like people who chose special education, they are special people, because I feel like in advance that there are going to probably be a lot of tough days, and you've intentionally made that choice. So for me, that says a lot about that person. So I want to say thank you to you, as well as thank you to all the listeners out there that may be in special education, and even those that are considering it. We need you in order to create this continuity or this plan for our kids so that they can be successful in our lives. So we greatly appreciate you and everything that you bring to education.
Yeah. Thank you.
So as we wrap up this session, I've learned a great deal from you over the years, and just in this conversation, on the importance of having positive relationships with the student as well as with the parents. How does the relationship, which this can be a little bit more bureaucratic, if you will, but how is the relationship between like administration in a general sense, not asking for specifics, of course, but in a general sense, how do you manage that relationship with the administration and being special ed? Because I see it as this. It's like, for me, I'm in middle management, meaning I'm the soldier on the ground. I do this day-to-day operations every day, so I see what happens. I feel like my management team has a perspective of
Mhm.
how it should go, and they have it on paper. They have this blueprint, but it is nothing like the real thing when you're in the classroom. So how do you manage that relationship? Because
Yeah.
that can be difficult.
It's funny you say that because I went back to school again for my leadership certificate, my like add-on. So I've actually been
Okay.
taking classes in leadership. I'll finish in May, hopefully, thankfully. Um, but so it had like I've actually spent some time thinking about this too. Like a lot of the times the administrators in general don't have a special education background. Like your APs, your principals, they came up a lot of times through general ed. Um, and now they're an assistant principal, and you have the class of kids who are most severe and require the most support, and they maybe have never been in there before. And I think that it's really important to have that open door policy with that. Like, come into my class, see what I'm doing, see what greatness can happen. Because there are, like we said, there are going to be times where we're going to need some backup and we're going to need some support from an administrator. But see us on good days too, right? See us when it's a beautiful activity or lesson, so that you know the good, so that you're familiar with our kids, so that you understand who they are, because there might be a time where you have to step in and help and support, and you're going to need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so having, like, as a teacher, making sure you're advocating for administrators coming in, come see my classroom, come see what we're doing. I remember as we were talking about it, do you remember the wax museum that I did with the class? We were doing like different careers and community helpers. And so we had every kid picked a different person. Coleman was a firefighter.
Yeah.
Um, and so we did this whole like writing activity with it, with AAC devices. And every kid set up a table and they had props, and I got books from the library. And so every kid had, there was the farmer, there were 2 firemen, there was a police officer, there was a train conductor. And so everyone had their little speech that they had to make about what their career was and what that person did. And Coleman's was programmed into his device so he could tell everyone. And I invited my administrators to come, and so that they could see the great things that we were doing. Like, we're not just sitting on our bums here and watching YouTube videos all day and just hanging out. We're teaching and we're learning and we're experiencing life in this class. And so that was a really great day for me to feel like my administrators know the kind of teacher I am, and they can depend on me to be a great teacher, and also know that when I'm coming to them saying, I need help, that I'm not just, bluffing, that no, I really do need help, or I need the support in this different way. And so I think that from the teacher perspective, because you can't control who your admin are, right? They're assigned to your building, they show up, you're there, maybe you've been there for 10 years and there's a new AP and principal coming in. And you do have to advocate for yourself as, here's what I am, here's what I do, here's the beauty of it, and I can't wait to see your support.
Well, thank you, Dr. Eswine, for sharing all of your gifts and talents on the Real Autism Podcast. I truly appreciate you and all you do. Keep being an inspiration to the kids as well as to all of your colleagues around you. And to the listeners out there, we look forward to seeing you next time for the next episode of the Real Autism Podcast, where we share relevant, effective, actionable living strategies and solutions. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to the Real Autism Podcast with Alicia Gaucher-Page. We'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this episode: J. Cole Autism Coaching, helping caregivers navigate to a better quality of life; AGP Organizational Coaching, helping people develop effective strategies, systems, and solutions to organize information. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or just visit us at jcoleadvocacy.com.